The elevator doors opened on the 13th floor at exactly 3:17 a.m., and Marcus knew immediately that something was wrong. The hallway stretched before him like a throat waiting to swallow, dimly lit by flickering sconces that cast dancing shadows on the burgundy carpet. But it wasn't the darkness that made his blood run cold. It was the wet footprints leading from the elevator to room 1317, each one perfectly formed, as if someone had just stepped out of a bathtub. The problem was room 1317 had been sealed for 3 years. Marcus Chen had been working the night shift at the Grand Meridian Hotel for 8 months, and he'd learned to follow the rules without question. 7 simple rules that kept him safe, kept him employed, and most importantly, kept him alive. Tonight, staring at those impossible footprints that seemed to glisten under the dying light, he realized he was about to break rule number 4. Never investigate sounds or disturbances on the 13th floor after 3 a.m. The radio crackled at his hip static, mixing with what sounded almost like whispers. His flashlight beam trembled as he stepped out of the elevator, the metal doors sliding shut behind him with a finality that made his stomach lurch. The Grand Meridian had stood in downtown Toronto since 1923, and in all those decades, it had accumulated secrets like dust in forgotten corners. Welcome back to my channel, everyone. I hope you're watching this from somewhere safe, somewhere well lit, because tonight's story is going to make you question every hotel you've ever stayed in. Before we begin, hit that like button if you're brave enough to hear what really happens during the night shift. Subscribe for more true horror stories, and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Are you alone right now? 3 days earlier, Marcus had been living what most would consider a perfectly ordinary life. At 28, he was a recent graduate from York University with a degree in criminal justice and a mountain of student debt that kept him awake at night. The security job at the Grand Meridian wasn't his dream career, but it paid well enough to keep his tiny apartment in Scarborough and put food on his table. The hotel itself was a relic of Toronto's golden age, a towering Art Deco monument that rose 22 floors above King Street West. During the day, it bustled with business travelers, tourists, and wedding parties. The lobby gleamed with polished marble and brass fixtures, and the staff moved with practiced efficiency. But at night, when the last guest had stumbled to their room and the lobby lights dimmed to amber pools, the Grand Meridian transformed into something else entirely. Marcus's supervisor, a grizzled man named Robert Kowalski, who'd worked security for 30 years, had given him the orientation on his first day. They'd sat in the cramped security office in the basement, surrounded by monitors showing feeds from dozens of cameras throughout the hotel. "Listen, kid," Robert had said, his Polish accent thick with exhaustion. "This job is easy if you follow the rules. I'm going to give you 7 rules and you're going to memorize them. You're going to follow them exactly no matter what you see, what you hear, or what your gut tells you to do." Marcus had nodded, thinking it was typical corporate protocol. Health and safety regulations, emergency procedures, the usual bureaucratic nonsense. He'd been wrong. The rules were handwritten on a yellowed index card that Robert kept taped to the desk. Rule 1. Never take the elevator to the 13th floor between midnight and 4 a.m. Rule 2. If you hear piano music coming from the ballroom after 2 a.m., do not investigate. Rule 3. The pool area is off limits during your shift. The door should remain locked. Rule 4. Never investigate sounds or disturbances on the 13th floor after 3 a.m. Rule 5. If a guest asks you about the woman in the white dress, tell them there is no woman in a white dress. Rule 6. Check the basement storage rooms every hour, but never go alone. Rule 7. If the phone rings in room 1417, do not answer it. Do not go to that room. These rules aren't suggestions. Robert had emphasized, his weathered face deadly serious. The last guy who worked nights here, he thought he knew better. He thought the rules were some kind of hazing ritual. They found him in the elevator shaft 3 weeks into the job. Marcus had wanted to laugh, to ask if this was some elaborate prank played on new employees. But something in Robert's eyes, a deep, haunted weariness, stopped him. The old man had seen things, experienced things that had carved permanent lines of worry into his forehead. For the first few months, Marcus had followed the rules religiously, more out of respect for Robert than any real belief in their necessity. His shifts were quiet, uneventful. He'd walk the halls, check the emergency exits, monitor the cameras, and file his reports. The hotel at night was peaceful, almost meditative. Guests slept soundly behind heavy doors, and the city hummed quietly beyond the windows. But recently, things had begun to change. It started with the piano music. Marcus first heard it on a Tuesday night in late October, just as the autumn wind began to rattle the hotel's windows. He'd been making his rounds on the second floor when the melody drifted up from somewhere below. A slow, melancholy waltz that seemed to echo through the building's bones. The music was beautiful, haunting, played with the skill of someone who had spent decades perfecting their craft. He'd checked his watch to 17 a.m. Rule number 2 flashed through his mind, but curiosity won over caution. The ballroom was on the main floor just off the lobby. Surely there was a rational explanation. Perhaps a late-night event or someone testing the sound system for a morning conference. Marcus made his way down the ornate staircase, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The lobby was empty, bathed in the amber glow of the emergency lighting. The front desk sat unattended computers humming softly in the silence. But the piano music continued clearer, now more distinct. It was coming from the grand ballroom, just as he'd suspected. The ballroom doors were massive things, carved mahogany with brass handles that gleamed even in the dim light. They were closed, but not locked. Marcus pressed his ear against the wood and listened. The music was definitely coming from inside, a complex piece that seemed to tell a story of love and loss of dreams that had withered like autumn leaves. His hand was on the door handle when his radio crackled to life. "Marcus, this is Robert. Respond immediately." The voice was sharp, urgent. Marcus stepped away from the door and keyed his radio. "This is Marcus. I'm here, Robert." "Where exactly are you, son?" "Main floor. I was just... Get away from the ballroom. Now. Don't ask questions, don't look back, just walk away and go to the security office." The music stopped. Marcus froze his hand, still holding the radio. The silence that followed was deafening, oppressive. It pressed against his eardrums like water, making him dizzy. He could hear his own heartbeat, the distant hum of the heating system, but nothing else. "Marcus, are you there?" "I'm here," he whispered. The music stopped. "Good. Now walk away, slowly. Don't run, but don't linger." Marcus backed away from the ballroom doors, his eyes fixed on the brass handles. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw them turn, as if someone inside was trying to open them from within. But the doors remained closed, and Marcus made his way to the security office with quick, measured steps. Robert was waiting for him in the basement, his face pale, but relieved. The older man looked like he'd aged years in the span of minutes. "You didn't go inside, did you?" Robert asked. "No, but I was about to. What's in there, Robert? What's really going on in this hotel?" Robert sank into his chair and rubbed his temples. "I've been working here for 30 years, Marcus. I've seen things that would make you quit this job and never look back. The Grand Meridian isn't just a hotel. It's a place where the past refuses to stay buried." He pulled out a thick folder from a locked drawer and placed it on the desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, incident reports, and photographs that looked decades old. "That piano music you heard, it's Eleanor Hartwell. She was the hotel's resident pianist back in 1952. Played in the ballroom every night for 15 years. Beautiful woman, incredible talent. She was supposed to get married on a Saturday evening, a November reception right here in the grand ballroom." Robert pulled out a black and white photograph of a stunning woman in her 30s, seated at a grand piano, her fingers dancing across the keys. Her fiancé never showed up, left her standing at the altar in front of 200 guests. Eleanor locked herself in the ballroom that night and played piano until dawn. They found her the next morning, still sitting at the bench, hands positioned over the keys. "Heart attack," the coroner said, but everyone knew she died of a broken heart. Marcus studied the photograph, noting the elegant curve of the woman's neck, the intense concentration in her eyes. "And she still plays. Every night since 1952, she plays that same waltz she wrote for her wedding, the song she never got to perform for her husband-to-be. But here's the thing, Marcus. Anyone who hears her play, anyone who goes into that ballroom during her performance, they don't come back out the same." "What do you mean?" Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. "They become part of her audience, forever. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow, every detail that seemed out of place during his night shifts. The hotel's atmosphere had shifted like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air becomes thick and electric. He followed the rules religiously, now understanding that they weren't just guidelines. They were survival instructions written in someone else's blood. But the hotel seemed to be testing him. On a Thursday night in November, Marcus was conducting his hourly basement check when he heard footsteps echoing from the floor above. Slow, deliberate steps that seemed to pace back and forth across the lobby. He checked the security monitors, but the cameras showed nothing, just empty hallways and silent spaces. Yet the footsteps continued, accompanied now by what sounded like quiet sobbing. He radioed the front desk but received no response. The night clerk Janet should have been at her station, but when Marcus called her extension, he got only a dial tone. The footsteps stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete it felt unnatural. Marcus climbed the stairs to the lobby, each step creaking under his weight, despite the thick carpeting. The front desk was abandoned, Janet's computer still logged in her coffee cup, still warm. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a plate beside the keyboard as if she'd simply vanished mid-bite. That's when he saw her. Standing near the elevators was a woman in a white dress, an elegant flowing gown that seemed to shimmer in the amber light. She was facing away from Marcus, her long dark hair cascading down her back like a waterfall. She stood perfectly still, unnaturally still, as if she were a statue that had been placed there as decoration. Marcus's throat went dry. Rule number 5 echoed in his mind. If a guest asks you about the woman in the white dress, tell them there is no woman in a white dress. But what was he supposed to do when he could see her with his own eyes? The woman began to turn slowly, impossibly slowly. Marcus caught a glimpse of pale skin of features that seemed both beautiful and terrible. He spun around and fled to the security office, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. 20 minutes later, Janet returned to the front desk, appearing as suddenly as she disappeared. When Marcus asked her where she'd been, she looked at him with genuine confusion. "I've been here all night," she insisted. "I never left my post." The security footage confirmed her story. According to the cameras, Janet had never moved from behind the desk. But Marcus knew what he'd seen. The empty chair, the abandoned sandwich, the woman in white, who turned with the mechanical precision of a music box dancer. The next incident happened 3 nights later. Marcus was checking the security monitors when camera 7, which covered the 13th floor hallway, went black. The screen showed nothing but static, occasionally interrupted by what looked like moving shadows. He tried switching to backup cameras, but they all showed the same thing: electronic snow peppered with dark shapes that moved with purpose but no clear form. His radio crackled with interference, and through the static he could hear something that made his blood freeze. A phone was ringing. Not just any phone, but the distinctive double ring of the hotel's internal system. And it was coming from the 13th floor, room 1317. Marcus stared at the bank of monitors, watching as one by one the cameras throughout the hotel began to malfunction. Static consumed the feeds, transforming the familiar hallways into landscapes of electronic chaos. But through it all, the phone continued to ring. Ring, 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 ring. Each double tone seemed to pierce through the building's infrastructure, vibrating through the walls, the floors, the very air itself. Marcus could feel it in his bones, a summons that grew stronger with each repetition. He thought about Robert's warnings about the previous security guard who'd been found in the elevator shaft. He thought about the rules and the terrible consequences of breaking them. But the ringing continued, insistent, demanding, impossible to ignore. Marcus found himself standing, walking toward the door, his hand reaching for the elevator button before he caught himself. The compulsion was overwhelming, a magnetic pull that seemed to originate from somewhere deep within his brain. It would be so easy to just take the elevator to the 13th floor, to walk down that hallway, to pick up the phone, and finally understand what was trying so desperately to communicate with him. The ringing stopped. Every monitor in the security office went black, simultaneously plunging the basement room into near total darkness. Marcus fumbled for his flashlight, the beam cutting through shadows that seemed thicker than they should be. And in the silence that followed the phone's last ring, he heard something that made him question his sanity. Laughter. Quiet, feminine laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. When the power returned, 30 seconds later, the monitors showed normal hotel views. Empty hallways, sleeping guests, Janet at her desk reading a paperback novel. But Marcus noticed something that made his hands tremble as he wrote his incident report. Every clock in the building had stopped at 3:17 a.m. The night that changed everything began like any other. Marcus arrived at 11 p.m. for his shift, exchanged pleasantries with the evening security guard, and settled into his routine. But there was something different in the air, an electric tension that made the hair on his arms stand up. The hotel felt like a pot about to boil over. At midnight, he received an unusual call from the front desk. A guest in room 847 was complaining about water damage. Apparently, the room directly above theirs was flooding and water was seeping through their ceiling. Marcus grabbed his master key and headed to the 8th floor to investigate. Room 947 was directly above the complaining guest's room, but when Marcus knocked, there was no answer. He used his master key to enter, expecting to find a burst pipe or an overflowing bathtub. Instead, he found a room that was not only dry, but appeared to have been unoccupied for months. The bed was perfectly made, the bathroom spotless, and a thick layer of dust covered every surface. But when he checked the guest registry on his tablet, it showed that room 947 was currently occupied by a Ms. Eleanor Hartwell, who had checked in that very evening. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. He backed out of the room, slowly locking the door behind him. As he waited for the elevator, he heard it. Piano music drifting up from the ballroom far below. The same haunting waltz he'd heard weeks earlier played with desperate, heartbroken precision. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, the music was calling specifically to him. The elevator arrived with its usual soft chime. But when the doors opened, Marcus saw that it was already occupied. Standing in the corner facing away from him was a woman in a white dress. Her dark hair fell in waves down her back, and her hands were positioned as if she were playing an invisible piano. Marcus stepped backward, but the elevator doors closed, taking the woman away to some unknown floor. His radio crackled and Robert's voice cut through the static. "Marcus, get to the security office immediately. Something's wrong with the building tonight. All the cameras on the 13th floor are active." "Active? What do you mean?" "I mean they're showing things, son. Things that shouldn't be there." Marcus ran for the stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time until he reached the basement. Robert was hunched over the monitors, his face illuminated by the blue glow of a dozen screens. But these weren't showing the normal hotel views. Instead, they displayed scenes from decades past. Ghostly figures moving through hallways, vintage furniture in rooms that should have been modern. And in the center of it all, a young woman in a white dress playing piano in an empty ballroom. "It's Eleanor," Robert whispered. "She's getting stronger. The barrier between past and present is breaking down." "What barrier? What are you talking about?" Robert pointed to camera 13, which showed the hallway outside room 1317. The door was standing open, and inside Marcus could see a figure lying on the bed. A man in a 1950s suit, perfectly still, his eyes wide open and staring at the ceiling. "That's Thomas Hartwell, Eleanor's fiancé. He didn't just abandon her at the altar, Marcus. He came to the hotel that night to call off the wedding, but Eleanor was already dead by the time he arrived. In his guilt and grief, he went to room 1317, their honeymoon suite, and took his own life. And they're both still here. They've been trapped here for 70 years, playing out the same tragedy night after night. But recently, their presence has been growing stronger. They're not just echoes anymore. They're trying to break through completely." As if summoned by their conversation, the phone in the security office began to ring. Not Marcus's radio or Robert's cell phone, but an old rotary telephone that sat on a dusty shelf in the corner. A phone that Marcus had never seen connected to anything, a phone that shouldn't have worked at all. "Ring. Ring. Don't answer it," Robert said, but his voice was weak, distant. "Rule 7. Never answer the phone." But Marcus was already moving. The compulsion was overwhelming now, a force that seemed to control his muscles, his thoughts, his very soul. He lifted the heavy black receiver and brought it to his ear. "Hello," he whispered. The voice that answered was beautiful, melodic, but filled with infinite sadness. "Marcus, I've been waiting for you to call. I'm so lonely here. Won't you come up and see me, room 1317? I'll play for you. I'll play our song. Eleanor. I've been waiting so long for my Thomas to return, but he's sleeping now, and I need someone to listen to my music. Someone to understand what I'm trying to say. Marcus felt his feet moving toward the door, but Robert grabbed his arm. The older man's grip was surprisingly strong. Fight it, son. She's not evil, but she's lost, and she'll take you with her if you let her. But the voice on the phone continued sweet and hypnotic. Please, Marcus, just this once. Break the rules for me. Come to the 13th floor. Let me play for you. The line went dead, but the compulsion remained. Marcus struggled against Robert's grip, his rational mind at war with an overwhelming need to reach the 13th floor. The hotel around them seemed to pulse with supernatural energy. Lights flickered, the building's structure groaned, and from somewhere far above, piano music began to play. Let me go, Marcus said, his voice not entirely his own. She's calling me. I can't do that, son. I've lost too many good people to this place. That's when the lights went out completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. In the blackness, Marcus heard footsteps, high heels clicking against the basement floor, moving closer with each beat of his racing heart. Robert's grip loosened, and Marcus heard the older man's sharp intake of breath. Eleanor, Robert whispered. How did you get down here? A voice answered from the darkness, close enough that Marcus could feel cold breath against his cheek. The rules are breaking down, Robert. Tonight the past and present become one. Tonight, I finally get my wedding dance. Marcus fumbled for his flashlight and switched it on. The beam illuminated Eleanor Hartwell standing directly in front of him, her white dress pristine despite 7 decades of death, her dark eyes fixed on his with desperate intensity. Dance with me, Marcus, she said, extending one pale hand. One dance and then you can go. Marcus knew she was lying. He could see it in her eyes. The same madness that had driven her to play piano until her heart stopped, the same obsession that had kept her trapped in this hotel for 70 years. One dance would become an eternity of dances, and he would join Thomas Hartwell in room 1317, staring at the ceiling with dead eyes while Eleanor played her wedding waltz forever. But her hand was so white, so delicate, and the compulsion was so strong. Marcus's flashlight beam wavered as he stared into Eleanor's desperate eyes. Behind her, the shadows seemed to move with their own intelligence, reaching toward him like dark fingers. The basement had become a pocket of 1952, where the rules of time and death no longer applied. But then Robert's voice cut through the supernatural fog that clouded Marcus's mind. Eleanor, listen to me. You don't want to hurt this boy. You're not evil, you're just lost. You've been lost for 70 years and you're tired. So tired. Eleanor's hand, still extended toward Marcus, began to tremble. For the first time since she'd appeared, uncertainty flickered across her pale features. I just want to dance, she whispered. I just want my wedding. Is that too much to ask? You had your wedding, Eleanor. Look behind you. Marcus followed Robert's gaze and saw something that made his heart ache with pity. Standing in the corner of the basement, visible only in the peripheral glow of the flashlight, was a man in a 1950s suit. Thomas Hartwell stood with his shoulders slumped, his face etched with grief and regret. He was reaching toward Eleanor, his mouth moving in silent words of apology. He came back, Robert said softly. He's been here all along, trying to reach you, trying to apologize. But you've been so focused on the living that you couldn't see the dead. Eleanor turned slowly, and when she saw Thomas, her face crumpled with 70 years of accumulated grief. The white dress that had been pristine moments before began to fade, becoming translucent, ethereal. Thomas, she whispered, you came back. Thomas nodded, tears streaming down his ghostly cheeks. He spoke, but no sound emerged. Instead, his words appeared in Marcus's mind, clear and desperate. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, my love. I was afraid and I made a terrible mistake. But I'm here now. I've been here waiting for you to see me. Eleanor moved toward her lost fiancé, her form becoming more transparent with each step. The supernatural pressure that had filled the basement began to lift like storm clouds, dissipating after a long tempest. The dance, she said, looking back at Marcus one last time. I still want my dance. Then dance with him. Marcus managed to say, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Dance with Thomas." Eleanor smiled, then the first genuine expression of joy Marcus had seen on her face. She took Thomas's spectral hand, and together they began to move in a slow, graceful waltz. As they danced, their forms grew fainter, more peaceful, until they were nothing more than wisps of light that swirled together in the darkness. The piano music that had been emanating from somewhere above grew softer, more melodic, transforming from a dirge of loneliness into a gentle lullaby of reunion. Then gradually it faded to silence. The lights flickered back on, revealing the empty basement. Robert and Marcus stood alone among the security monitors, which now showed normal hotel views. Quiet hallways, sleeping guests, the natural rhythm of a building at rest. "Is it over?" Marcus asked. Robert nodded slowly. "I think so. They found each other finally. Sometimes that's all it takes. Someone to see what's really there, someone to understand that the dead aren't always trying to hurt the living. Sometimes they just need help finding their way home." Marcus sank into a chair, his legs shaking with delayed reaction. The compulsion that had driven him toward the 13th floor was completely gone, replaced by a deep exhaustion that seemed to settle in his bones. "The rules," he said. "Are they still necessary?" "For now, yes. Eleanor and Thomas have moved on, but this hotel has other secrets, other stories. The Grand Meridian has been collecting ghosts for 100 years, and not all of them are as benign as Eleanor." As if to emphasize his point, one of the monitors flickered, showing a brief image of the hotel pool. For just a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw figures moving beneath the water, pale shapes that swam in impossible patterns before the feed returned to normal. "Room 1317, Marcus asked. Robert checked the monitor that covered the 13th floor. The door to 1317 was closed now, and when he switched to the internal camera, the room appeared normal. Clean, ready for guests, empty of any supernatural presence. "Clean," Robert confirmed. "Eleanor and Thomas are gone. That room will finally know peace." But as Marcus prepared to resume his normal rounds, he noticed something that made him pause. Camera 7, which had malfunctioned so often recently, was working perfectly now. But in the corner of the screen, barely visible in the hallway's ambient lighting, was a small pile of white flowers. Lilies arranged as if someone had dropped a wedding bouquet. When Marcus checked the hall an hour later, the flowers were gone. 2 weeks passed without incident. Marcus continued his night shifts at the Grand Meridian, but the hotel felt different now. Lighter, more peaceful. The oppressive atmosphere that had plagued the building for months had lifted like fog before sunrise. Guests slept soundly, staff worked without the nagging sense of being watched, and Marcus's rounds became routine once again. Room 1317 was reopened for booking, and Marcus felt a strange sense of pride when he saw a young couple check in for their honeymoon. The past had finally been laid to rest, and life could continue. Or so he thought. On a Thursday night in early December, Marcus was finishing his paperwork when Robert appeared in the security office doorway. The older man looked troubled, holding a manila envelope that he turned over and over in his weathered hands. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. Something about that night with Eleanor and Thomas." "What about it?" Robert sat down heavily and opened the envelope. Inside were newspaper clippings, old photographs, and what appeared to be police reports dating back decades. "I told you that the previous security guard was found in the elevator shaft. Remember the one who didn't follow the rules?" Marcus nodded. His name was David Chen. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Chen? But that's your surname, yes. David Chen was your older brother." Marcus stared at Robert in disbelief. "That's impossible. I don't have a brother. I'm an only child." Robert pulled out a birth certificate from the envelope. David Chen, born March 15, 1991. Parents Li Wei Chen and Margaret Chen. He had a younger brother named Marcus, born 1995. The document was authentic, bearing official seals and stamps. But Marcus had no memory of any brother, no childhood recollections of sibling rivalry or shared toys or family photos with another boy. "I don't understand," Marcus whispered. "How could I forget having a brother because you were only 7 when he died?" Traumatic amnesia is common in children who experience severe loss. Your parents moved you away from Toronto immediately after the incident, changed their names, started over. They thought it would be better if you never remembered." Robert pulled out a photograph. A family portrait showing a younger version of Marcus standing next to an older boy who shared his features. The resemblance was unmistakable. David got the job here in 2016. He was smart, responsible, followed the rules for the first few weeks. But then he started asking questions about room 1317, about the woman in white, about why certain areas were off limits. I tried to warn him, but he thought he knew better. What happened to him? The same thing that almost happened to you. Eleanor called to him, compelled him to break the rules. But unlike you, David had no one to pull him back from the brink. He went to the 13th floor on his own, answered the phone in room 1317. And Eleanor took him. Marcus felt his world tilting on its axis. "You mean Eleanor killed him?" "Not killed exactly. She made him part of her story. For 6 years, David has been trapped on the 13th floor, part of Eleanor's eternal wedding party. When you started working here, when Eleanor began reaching out to you specifically, it wasn't random. She was trying to complete her collection. 2 brothers to dance at her wedding, an eternal audience for her eternal performance. The implications crashed over Marcus like a cold wave. So, when Eleanor and Thomas moved on, David should have been freed too. That's what I thought would happen. But when I checked the security footage from that night, when I really studied what happened in the basement, I realized something terrible. Robert's hands shook as he pulled out a final photograph. A security camera still showing the basement during the supernatural encounter. In the image, Marcus could see himself, Robert, Eleanor, and Thomas. But there, standing in the background, barely visible in the shadows, was another figure. A young man in a security guard uniform watching the scene with empty eyes. "David never left," Robert said. "When Eleanor and Thomas found peace when they moved on together, David remained. He's still trapped on the 13th floor, but now he's alone. Completely alone." Marcus studied the photograph, recognition dawning with horrible clarity. The figure in the shadows had his eyes, his nose, the same stubborn jaw that ran in their family. "How long has he been trying to reach me?" "Ever since you started working here. The malfunctioning cameras, the supernatural incidents, even Eleanor's increased activity. It was all David's doing. He's been trying to get your attention, trying to make you remember him." As if summoned by their conversation, the lights in the security office began to flicker. The monitors displayed brief flashes of static, and in the interference, Marcus could make out a pattern. Dots and dashes like Morse code. HELPMEREMBERMEIMYOURBROTHER. Marcus felt memories stirring in the deepest recesses of his mind. Fragments of a childhood he'd been forced to forget. A bedtime story read by lamplight. A piggyback ride through their parents' house. An older boy teaching him to tie his shoes. "David," he whispered. And the name felt familiar on his tongue, like a word he'd been trying to remember for years. The monitors cleared, showing normal hotel views, but Marcus knew his brother was listening. Somewhere on the 13th floor, David Chen was waiting for his little brother to come home. "The rules," Marcus said. "Do they still apply?" Robert looked at the security cameras, then at Marcus, and slowly shook his head. "Not for you. They were never meant to keep you out, Marcus. They were meant to keep everyone else away until you were ready, until you remembered." Marcus stood up, his decision made. "I'm going to the 13th floor." "I know," Robert said. "Just remember, David's been alone for 6 years. He may not be exactly the same brother you lost." As Marcus walked toward the elevator, he felt a strange sense of completeness, as if a piece of himself that had been missing was finally within reach. The elevator doors opened at his approach, and for the first time since he'd started working at the Grand Meridian, Marcus pressed the button for the 13th floor without hesitation. Behind him, Robert watched the monitors as the elevator climbed through the building. On camera 13, the hallway outside room 1317 was no longer empty. A figure in a security guard uniform stood waiting by the door, and when he looked directly into the camera, he smiled with recognition and love. The elevator reached the 13th floor, and the doors opened to reveal Marcus's brother, exactly as he had been 6 years ago, waiting to finally welcome his little brother home. The Grand Meridian Hotel stood silent in the Toronto night, its secrets finally ready to be shared between brothers who had been apart for far too long.